So Ayurveda translates as the science of life or the knowledge of life, and it originated in the Indian subcontinent and is one of the world's oldest medical systems. Ayurveda is still practiced around the world today, and it is something that I've studied a little bit of. Coming out of college, I started doing yoga in the Shivananda tradition, and I'll have some slides showing a little bit of some of those concepts. And I did spend time living on their ashram up in Canada. They have an ashram, and there was, after spending some time there, an Ayurvedic doctor who runs the California School of Ayurvedic Medicine, Dr. Mark Halpern, he came and I did some intensive work with him. I was really, wanting to understand, some of the things I like the most about Ayurveda, which we'll get into, is that there's this real focus and concept on what's known as dinacharya, which is your daily life and your daily routine. And so, it's not that you just need this herbal formula to fix this thing. It's more like, well, what are you doing with your whole life? How can you lead your life and just the things that you do on a day-to-day basis in a way that supports your health? So I really was excited by those concepts and enjoyed studying with him. And then I was also able to take some different classes with Dr. Vasant Lad, who I'm going to share a few of his resources as well. But again, Ayurveda being this ancient medical system, which has such old texts. These texts were originally written not in English, right? They're not written in English. They're written in Sanskrit. And so there is a depth to Ayurveda where I reached a point in my studies where, unless I was going to study Sanskrit and learn Sanskrit, I didn't feel like I would be able to go much deeper or further. To give an example, there are some remedies that would be prepared where the actual ingredients of the remedies are the same, but they're used for different situations. And the thing that changes them would be the prayers that are chanted over them. And so that, of course, again, requires an understanding of language that I didn't have. But I still think there's so many wonderful concepts that we can learn from Ayurveda. And so what I wanted to share with you here was a description of what is considered a healthy person. So we have all of these old texts that survive, and one of the earliest was the Sushruta Samhita. And here is the description of a healthy person. One who is established in self, who has balanced doshas, which I have translated here as meaning energy patterns. So balanced doshas, balanced agni, which is your digestive fire, properly formed dhatus, which are your tissues, proper elimination of malas, so proper elimination of waste, well-functioning bodily processes, and whose mind, soul, and senses are full of bliss is called a healthy person. So I love this, right? So they're saying someone who's got balanced energy, who can digest, whose body's formed well, is able to poop and pee and sweat properly, and, who's full of bliss. That's a healthy person. I just think that's a really great, simple, straightforward, to the point description. So, sorry. Okay, good. I didn't skip. So there are, again, elements in Ayurveda. They have 5 elements, and we would recognize several of them: air, fire, water, earth. This first one, though, is a little bit different. It's called ether or akasha, and this is just space. So it's not a thing, it's not air, it's just space. So it's what existed before other things started happening. It's pure presence, it's all pervading, and it's clear. Then you have air or vayu, and this is actually movement. This is what introduces movement to things, is when the vayu comes. And, obviously we can think about the wind as well with air. You've got fire, also known as tehas, and this is friction, this is life, this is transformation, and metabolism. So earlier on that slide, where it says here, balanced agni or digestive fire, that is the transformation, right? So you've got the food that comes in, and then the agni acts on that, and it transforms that into something else. So that's the fire element. We also have water or jala, and this is flow, fluidity, juices. And finally, earth or prithvi, which is cohesion, solidity, and nurturing. So you've got all these different elements, and then these elements come together into what are known as doshic types. So the 3 doshas. There are 3 doshas and then combinations of doshas as well, I should say. So the first dosha we'll talk about is the vata dosha. The vata dosha is said to be made up from ether and from air. So those 2 things together is a vata person. So this person is cold and dry. Notice there's no water here. That's why they're dry. And there's no fire here. That's why they're cold. You can compare that to the pitta person who's hot and oily because there's your fire and your water. Or the kapha person who's cold and wet because while you have water, you have no fire here. So they're cold, right? So both vata and kapha are cold because there's no fire there. Vata relates, or that doshic manifestation is involved in the movement of things because, as we said before, air is movement. So a vata person could be very burpy, for example. When vata is balanced, they are very creative. They're very inspired, shall we say, spiritual, reaching, discovering. This is that air and that ether. But if vata is unbalanced, they can be very anxious and they can be forgetful. I think one way I think about it is that, vata doesn't have any earth or any water. Those are both material things, and material things can ground us, right? Like earth, we can ground into it. Water, we can ground into it as well. But ether and air is almost the absence of things, right? So we can get a bit anxious and feel ungrounded. The pitta dosha type is hot and oily. This is due to the coming together of the fire and the water elements. This pitta is related to metabolism and the transformation of things. A pitta dosha type, which is very balanced, is very courageous, very intelligent, a leader. But when unbalanced, this can be aggressive. This can be angry. This can be demanding. That heat unchecked could be angry. The kapha, where we have water and earth coming together, think about that water and earth that's wet, and it's kind of heavy as well. It's cold because there is no fire element in this doshic type. It is related to the storage of things. And when it's balanced, kapha can be very loving and very patient. But unbalanced kapha, like too much kapha going on, this could be like lazy, like inertia, like not able to really get up and move. Also a hoarding kind of tendency or a greed. And there can also be a depression, maybe like a lethargy type of depression. And as we said before, you can have different combinations of these doshic types. We can also have, a tridoshic type, someone who is all 3 of these doshic types in a very balanced way. So these doshas get related to, to people in like an archetypal way. So it enables us to work with someone and to start to look for different patterns. And let's say we are working with someone and they seem to have all these different vata type characteristics. Their skin is very dry. They don't seem to be able to put on weight easily. So they seem a little bit thin or malnourished. They're a bit flighty. Their brain and their conversation with you jumps from something to something to something, right? And you're like, wow, this person's really vata. Or maybe they're really cold too. So once we can make that assessment, we can be like, oh, well, this is vata, maybe a little bit extreme and excessive. So let's support this vata person with this vata dosha type by doing things that are a little bit more pitta building or kapha building, right? So let's give them foods that encourage the pitta in them to help balance them out, things that are warming, things that are, oily. Let's use kaphic things, things that are moistening, things that help them store. And so you can think about it in terms of the herbs that you choose. So for a Vata person, I might choose some ginger, which is warming, or I might choose things like, oatmeal because it's moistening, right? And there's all that mucilaginous quality to oatmeal. So you can think about it in terms of food and herbs, but then you can also think about it in terms of lifestyle recommendations or movement recommendations. When I was training at with the Ayurvedic doctor, one of the things we worked on was understanding how to lead someone through a asana routine. So for doing yoga, in a way that would support them. So for the Vata person who can be a bit anxious, you would tend to bring them into a highly controlled kind of environment so they don't get nervous. You would tend to use more blankets and things to keep somebody warmer. If someone's laying in, for example, a Shavasana pose, or sometimes it's known as corpse pose, maybe instead of their palms facing up out into the universe, we help ground them by having them flip their palms over. So it's touching the earth, helping them ground. If someone is doing like a cobra pose, maybe instead of coming up so high, so many points are leaving contact with the earth, we have them, so no king cobra kind of move. Instead, we have them do a modified one where just the head and neck are coming back and stretching. They can still get a really wonderful stretch that way, but they remain more grounded. So you learn of ways to do little tweaks to movements for people, food or herbs for people, other kinds of lifestyle things as well. And so let's keep going through here. Speaking of lifestyle, so this is Shivananda. He was a yogi and a doctor, actually, and he worked a lot with leper communities suffering from leprosy in India. And some of his students came west in the late 50s and established ashrams. And so those were the lineages that I worked with. One of the reasons I was attracted originally to the Shivananda tradition was because it was the most affordable one. I was living in New York City at the time. Yoga would be really, really expensive. And you could, for $5, take a really nice yoga class at this little brownstone over in, like kind of the Chelsea area. And there are these, different points and these different aspects to living this kind of yogic life. So living in this Ayurvedic way. And these were the way that the Shivananda tradition kind of codified it. So again, this was made in a digestible way for Westerners to comprehend. So proper exercise, which is known as asana. Asana is proper exercise. However, I would say in America, we probably say yoga for this. But asana refers to the postures that we do with that exercise. Proper breathing, which is pranayama. Proper relaxation, shavasana. Proper diet, which would be a vegetarian diet based on concepts of ahimsa, or do no harm. And then positive thinking and meditation. So this would be Vedanta and Dhyana. And finally, selfless service, which is also known as karma yoga. So I mentioned dinacharya earlier, and this is this concept of the importance of practicing a healthy daily routine and doing self-care. And these are two books that I think can be really great for that, if anyone's interested in diving a little bit deeper. The first is the Ayurvedic Cooking for Self-Healing, and this was written by Usha Lad and Dr. Vasant Lad. So this is the couple, and they have in this book help you kind of understand your dosha type, and then show you, different foods that would be really great for you depending on which dosha type you are. So if you are like really, really, really Vata, they've got different meals and different beverages and different options for things that can be really supportive for you as a Vata. And they've also gone that one step further to break it up into a seasonal type of thing. So, what's good for a Vata in the springtime? What's good for a Vata in the wintertime? Because depending on the season it is, doshas will be under different kinds of pressures. For example, the Pitta person who is fiery and hot, they might get extra aggravated in a really hot summer. So they might really need some extra cooling things in the summer, but they might just be happy as all get out in the wintertime. You know, if you look at someone who is inherently cold, so maybe the vata who is cold and dry and thin, and, you know, they might really suffer in the wintertime. So they might need like extra moistening, extra warming foods and things like that in the wintertime, whereas they're maybe doing just fine and love the summer. So that's a really nice book to check out. And then the next one, Ayurveda, The Science of Self-Healing. This is where he really lays out more in depth, just basic concepts of Ayurveda. So this is like a nice textbook in a way, but also does it in a way that's manageable and understandable and looks at things like a little bit of diet, a little bit on herbs, a little bit on daily routine, etc. So the Ayurvedic books by Vasant Lad, I showed these two, Science of Self-Healing and Cooking for Self-Healing. There's also the Yoga of Herbs. He wrote that with David Frawley, so the two of them together. And that's a nice materia medica. Great place to look up herbs. It includes not just Ayurvedic herbs, but it also has several European and American herbs listed in there as well, but looked through the lens of Ayurveda.